You're watching Beyond Market. Welcome. I'm Esther Awuni. Many thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll explore ways to drive higher economic growth outcomes for Africa's largest economy this year. As always, you can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Market. You can also send your thoughts and your comments to my Twitter handle too. It's at Esther O. Awuni. Interesting times ahead for Africa's largest economy this year as Nigeria's government is working to change the narrative around its revenue challenges and slow economic growth. Mustafa Chike Obi, Executive Vice Chairman of Alpha African Advisory, joins me to explore ways to drive better outcomes for Nigeria. I would like us to start by just having maybe like a quick recap of 2019. Perhaps some of those big wins that we recorded from a macroeconomic perspective. We had a couple of new first-time policies, as it were. We had the finance bill. We had finally been able to return back to the January-December budget cycle, as it were. And of course, just that stronger push that we saw on the part of the government for higher revenues. Your thoughts?
Well, I would say that the biggest win last year was that the election is over and we're still together as a country. And all appeals have been exhausted, and we should just all look forward to making Nigeria a stronger and better place. A lot of people predicted doom and gloom, and we're still here. So that's the biggest win. But I think that what I saw last year was a much more vigorous effort by the government to really look at the economic growth of the country. A number of policies, monetary and fiscal, were enacted. The intentions are very, very good. Some of them I don't think went far enough, but I think that the intention of government, at least in the economy, is now unified towards growth and how to move the economy forward. I still think that in many cases, they haven't gone far enough, but I think that generally the direction is positive and good.
But would you say that now there is better synergy between the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities in terms of what they both, obviously we take direction from the fiscal side of things, but would you say there's better synergy now on both sides?
I don't know about synergy, but I do know that they're in the same direction. Okay. And that the direction, what seems to be obsessing and properly the fiscal side is revenue growth. And the monetary side, what seems to be their focus is spurring economic growth. So you're looking for revenue and you're looking for the economy to grow. The best, of course, for revenue to grow ultimately is if the economy is growing. That's the ultimate way. So they're in the same direction. A lot of the things that CBN has done, like increased loan-to-deposit ratios, all those things are geared towards growth in the economy. And a lot of the things that the fiscal side are doing is revenue drive. So they're in the same direction. Like I say, I wouldn't say that they've gone far enough in some things.
Okay, so we're in the new budget cycle for the year, and hopefully we're hoping to see CapEx begin to roll out as soon as possible. But more importantly, and I know the focus for the government this year also will be revenues, as you've highlighted. We've seen the new finance bill, now law. Of course, included is the VAT, the 7.5%, which the finance minister says will take effect on the 1st of February this year. Your thoughts on this new finance law? How far-reaching is it? And from a revenue growth perspective for the government, is it far-reaching enough?
This finance bill, I've unfortunately read it thoroughly, and it's a very good bill. Okay. I think it's one of the better bills I've seen come from the National Assembly in recent times. They had 5 objectives. Anybody who reads the bills can see there are 5 objectives. I think the bill will hit 4 of them. But there's the last part, raising revenue for government. I'm not sure that this bill will succeed in raising government revenues. One, because they put in properly many exclusions, like this small business, medium business, and large-scale businesses, and they've reduced the taxes significantly on the small and medium, which constitute much of the businesses in Nigeria. Okay, yeah. So I think that when I look at this bill, and I haven't done all the numbers, I think this bill is at best revenue neutral, maybe revenue negative. The 2.5 increase in VAT, minus the exclusions that they've put in the bills to encourage small businesses and medium businesses, I think they will cancel each other out. And I think that in the end, this is not a revenue-generating bill.
You don't think the SMEs should have been left out?
I think they should have been left out because I'm for growth. But I'm saying the objective of raising revenues in the short term, I don't think will be accomplished by this bill. But it's a very, very good bill. The only thing I don't like about this bill is that they should have been, since we're in a high inflation economy, they should have had inflation indexes. For example, a business that's 25 million naira today, which is defined as a small business, at 10% inflation rate, that 25 million revenues will be equivalent to 50 million revenues. So there should have been a way of indexing many things that have numbers to inflation, so that at end of every year, a small business, if inflation was 10%, would no longer be 25 million, but 27.5 million. Okay. So that we don't get to the point where after 10 years, the 25 million becomes irrelevant because we've inflated it, where inflation has made 25 really a very, very, very small number. So there should have been inflation indexing in the bill. That's one thing I think was missing in the bill. But I think it's a revenue neutral bill, but it's a very, very good bill. It will spur business, it will increase, it will create growth in the economy, and it accomplishes the other things that they mentioned. They also want to increase foreign investment. And while it makes doing business easier for foreigners, I still think the issue of the currency policy has to be addressed by some other people. This is not for the bill, for this bill. But that issue also has to be addressed in trying to bring in foreign investment.
We'll talk about the exchange rate and the monetary side of things. Before, let's now talk about the budget.
Yes.
And of course, hoping that we begin to see capex out in good time. But what are your thoughts, or what are your expectations in terms of capital spend and how far-reaching? Because honestly, just looking at the revenue versus capex, I mean, it's still, I mean, there's still that imbalance. So is it much ado about nothing? Because at the end of the day, we're not spending enough as much as we should be.
Yeah, the budget is, as we all know, is very, very small. It is very small per capita. It is very small. It will not do the things we want the budget to do, either on the capital side or on the recurrent side. We know this. But the challenge that we have is that we don't have the revenues. So what we have to focus on is A, investment. We have to bring in investment. We have to have policies that encourage and guarantee investments from foreigners, because we don't have it. We don't have it here. We need probably $30 billion a year to address our capital issues, even a little bit.
Why do you think we still struggle in that regard? Because that is one point having guests last year also, it was one point we discussed exhaustively, and everyone kept saying we need more FDI, we need more, not the FBI's proper, foreign direct investment.
Yes.
And of course, I kept talking and circling around the same issues, making the environment more friendly, ensuring that, okay, the investors know that they can exit when they want to, the legal side of things, dispute and all of that. But your thoughts in terms of why we're still struggling in that regard?
I think, again, this is not my view. This is I travel a lot, and I talk to a lot of international investors, and I talk to a lot of people who are in positions of big economic power across the world. I talk to them. Many of them I knew when I was on Wall Street. Okay. And the issue that they all bring up is that the inevitability at some point of a currency devaluation, a massive currency devaluation. Whether it's true or false, they all believe it to be true. And that guides their behavior. So nobody is going to bring in their money, foreign money, when they believe that that money will be devalued at some point. They don't know when, but they are fairly certain it will happen. So that uncertainty, I believe, is inhibiting foreign investment more than anything else. They will listen to all our plans, they'll be polite to us, but when they leave the room, they're like, if I bring in my naira at 360, my dollar's at 360 today, dollar 360. If it gets to 500 in the next 5 years, whatever the time horizon they're thinking is, then I can't see how I can get my money back. So I think that issue has to be addressed.
What argument can the CBN, the central bank, come or the monetary authorities come up with to allay their fears and say, okay, this is a plan, even from now, perhaps till 5 years? We know that a lot of it is dependent on, of course, oil prices, which we do not control. But they have their forecasts. What convincing argument can the CBN put on the table?
Well, it depends on who you're trying to convince. The biggest audience for this conversation is the president. The president is disposed against currency devaluation for a number of reasons, one of which he has seen it happen and it hasn't seemed to have positive effect on the people.
From a political perspective? Obviously.
Even from actual.
Okay.
So he is disposed against it. So what arguments are you going to marshal to convince him? And he may well say correctly, well, you guys devalued from 160 when I came in to 360, and you're still complaining. What confidence do I have that if you go from 360 to 500, there'll be any improvement? So he is the first audience. Now the arguments to persuade him as to why it's best and how you have to have a plan, and then you have to come with a plan to him and convince him. He's the number one audience. Once that plan is accepted by him, then I think it's easier to convince. Once you have a plan to make the currency stable and remove this fear of this boogeyman of some devaluation in the future, I think you get a lot more foreign investment. I am willing to bet that if we have a good plan where we adjust our currency according to inflation and interest rates in a very, very predictable manner, that you will see foreign investment 30 to 50 billion a year coming for the next 10 years. I'm willing to bet on that. But we have to address the issue. And I do agree that it's a difficult issue to address. Because
so do you believe that perhaps do you believe that there should be a devaluation, that the Naira is where the Naira is today?
My suggestion would be that the inflation rate is 10% thereabouts.
Well, we're currently at 11.9%, and we're having higher projections for this year.
So let's even use 12%, which is better. If it's 12%, I think that we should adjust our currency downwards by 1% a month. That way is predictable. People can make plans. People know that a year from now, the currency will be adjusted down 12%. Foreigners know they can hedge the exposure. You know if you put in money today, a year from now, you get 12% less. So the interest rate you want is 12% to break even. So now you can hedge all those things, and when you bring your investment, you are certain as to where you can take it out from. So people know. And if 1% a month is too much, we can do 0.5% a month. Whatever it is, we can all work it out. We have a very strong economic advisory council that can look at those things and recommend. But what we need to do is we can't have an economy this big where people are afraid that something, even individuals, people think in their daily lives that the devaluation is going to come. And a lot of people I know are hoarding dollars because there's uncertainty. We need to have more certainty, both domestically and internationally. And I think if we do, however we do it, and there are brilliant minds that can come up with how to do it, we will be able to attract significant foreign investment.
Okay,
and the president is the number person that has to be convinced, I believe.
Okay. Mustafa Chike Obi is Executive Vice Chairman of Alpha African Advisory, and he's our guest today on Beyond Market, and we've been exploring ways to drive better economic outcomes for Africa's largest economy. Mustafa, thank you for your time so far. Let's pick up from where we left off, still on, of course, let's move away for now, away from the currency. Let's quickly talk about the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, the ERGP. That will run its course this year. And of course, there's talk about perhaps another document, maybe another medium-term document replacing it. But in terms of projections and what the document sought to achieve, especially around economic growth, that wasn't achieved. But your thoughts on where we go from here as per this document?
Well, I think ERGP, and I always criticize it for being not ambitious enough. As well as all my criticism that if we're aiming for 4 or 5% growth, it's not going to solve our problems long term. I mean, China just announced the economic numbers today or yesterday, 6.1%, and everybody's devastated that this is too low.
Well, it's the lowest in 29 years.
Less than 29 years, 6.1%. Think about what that means. That 6.1%, their population growth is less than 1%, and they are unhappy with 6.1% economic growth. We should be aiming at 10% economic growth. That's what we should aim at. And if we aim at it properly, we will get there. We won't get there tomorrow, but that should be the aim. So I think that there should be, having a document that plans your economy is a good thing. So ARGP as a concept was good. I just don't think that the objectives were ambitious enough. The next document should be more ambitious, and it should aim at double-digit GDP growth. And for those who don't think it can be done, it can be done, and if the countries behind it, it will be done. So I'm glad it's run its course, but I will encourage the next people coming up with the document to be far more ambitious.
I'm just wondering where that firepower will come from. I mean, when the ERGP first started, there was a bit of a momentum, but then, of course, oil prices and then this general weak, and it's just not here, not just in Africa. The global economy itself is experiencing some weakness, and obviously we're not left out of it. So I'm just wondering where that firepower will come. We've been on the diversification journey for a while now. We've seen major changes in agriculture, the labor-intensive sectors, especially agriculture, manufacturing, but we still have those structural issues that continue to pull us back. Power, for instance, is still a big issue. Yes, we've taken this loan. There's a power sector recovery program, as I know it is on. It would just appear to be that the pace is a problem. Where, and again I ask, the firepower, how do we ramp that up?
First of all, let us face the facts about the economy. We want to socialize the economy, and that's the problem. It's been proven everywhere in the world that the fastest growing economies are not socialized, they're capitalized. So power, for example, I have been saying it and it sounds cruel. Power, you will never get power as long as you have a socialist bent on power, that everybody deserves power at a low, affordable rate. That is not correct. Power is a very valuable resource, and the people that can pay the most for it should be charged the most for it. And that's the way we did with the telephones. When the telephone started, the richest people paid an arm and a leg for SIM cards, and it's that paying from the private sector, from the richest part, that kind of hidden tax on the rich that supports infrastructure. So power, let the people in Ikoyi pay whatever the market will bear. Right now, they are being told to pay 60 naira per kilowatt hour or thereabouts. They're willing to pay 200 naira per kilowatt hour if you give them regular power. Let them pay it. When they finish paying it, there'll be more supply. In 5 years, you will have 100,000 megawatts. If you allow the power companies to charge the richest people what the market will bear, they will make so much more money that they will create power. But once you tell people there's no power, but you must sell it at some socialized rate, you will never get power. So we just have to face the facts that power is a valuable resource and people should pay for it. It's like saying everybody deserves to ride in a Mercedes-Benz. I guess they do, but if you build a society on that belief, it won't work. So we just have to be, so we're socializing a lot of things. Subsidies is socializing the economy. The notion that foreign exchange should be at a level that makes people able to buy foreign goods is a socialization of foreign exchange. Let's just realize that we must focus on capitalism in our economy, and that's the way to grow it. So we can grow it. I can give you many suggestions of how to grow it. And when you say agriculture is labor intensive, it is not. Holland, with very few people, is one of the biggest agricultural countries in the world. The percent of people in America that in agriculture are very small. I think it's under 1%.
But here, if you look at the number of where the concentration on the population of the farmers that we have in rural areas, it's a high number.
Because
so I guess maybe in our own, in the Nigerian context.
If we want to improve agriculture, then we must mechanize it and industrialize it. And when you do that, you will find that it's not very labor intensive. So where there's where productive labor intensity is in services. And so we must mechanize agriculture, industrialize agricultural processing. The people that are freed from that, we must put them in the new technology, information technology, the intelligence technology. Those are the places where you will be productive and you can use a lot of people. But right now, putting people in farms is not very productive.
Back to that issue of the socialist type economy. I've asked this question, posed this question to many economists, asking them, what kind of economy do we want to be? What kind of economy are we? Or what kind of economy should we be? How would you answer that? It would appear that I asked 3 questions there. So what economy should we be, given the times, given where we are, perhaps as a people?
The imperative for Nigerian economy must be growth, double-digit growth.
Is it market-based economy? Is it
whatever we can do to accomplish 10% GDP growth a year for the next 20 years is what we must do. If we don't do it, eventually we'll run off the cliff. It may take us a little bit longer, but we'll run off the cliff. We have too many people, and people are growing too fast, that if we do not grow our GDP at double-digit for a long time, we will not be able to feed them, educate them, clothe them, house them, treat them when they're sick. The only way to do that is double-digit GDP growth. So we must all get together and say, how can we accomplish it? At least, how can we aim at double-digit growth? Anything else won't work.
All of this is, while we talk about this, there's also the context of just to take us out of Nigeria for a bit, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is also, will be happening simultaneously as we as a country try to grow the economy. And it brings its own opportunities, bigger markets, etc., for both regional and perhaps also global in terms of value chains, especially for a sector like the agriculture. Our farmers can plug into regional and global markets. I'm just wondering, what is your perspective in terms of how we are positioning ourselves to take advantage of that, or what should we be doing?
Well, the drivers of the economy, infrastructure generally, and education. In education, we're competitive. But the problem with education is that, good young people are leaving. So we educate them and then they leave. That's a huge cost that we will bear later, but it's not immediate. We still have enough people here to do what we need to do. But infrastructure-wise, we're not, so because of that, we're not very competitive even in Africa. If you go to Ivory Coast, they have better infrastructure, they have more regular power. So they tend to be, so in a competition with Ivory Coast in terms of economy, we will not do well. So I understand the reluctance of the government against signing that act. At the time, they were reluctant because we're not really very competitive, even versus our fellow African countries. Even versus Ghana, we're not very competitive in terms of cost of production, productivity, and all those things. So we need to address those issues. But if we address those issues, we will dominate. So the question is, if we sign this act, will it spur us to be more competitive, or will it hurt us in the short run? I am on the side of that it was a good thing to sign it, and that it will create more opportunities and it will drive us to higher goals. But it's not so clear.
Obviously, we need to. We have no choice but to be more
competitive now. Yes,
now that it's happening. It's not waiting for anybody.
Exactly.
I'd like to also quickly get your thoughts on the ECHO. That's another event that's going to happen this year. The CFA franc zone countries are signing on to it. I hear July, but there are a lot of concerns around it. There is some requirements that countries in the West African, even ECOWAS, those who want to join have to meet. And just looking at the list, for instance, a budget deficit of 3%, inflation rate of less than 10%, debt stock less than 70% of GDP. Now, looking at this list, Nigeria's finance minister says only Togo at this point will meet or is on track to meeting the requirements of this ECHO. But just the general concept of it, because my mind goes to the Eurozone, what happened to Greece and the other smaller European countries, and I just wonder, what are your thoughts?
Well, look at the genesis of this ECHO, this so-called ECHO. The French companies were tied to the French central bank because their currency was basically synchronized with the French franc. And so now they're saying, no, we want central bank independence, as it were. We want monetary independence. So they've separated from France and they formed this new thing. It's of no moment and it's of no concern to Nigeria. We should just ignore them. Let them do what they want to do.
So when you talk about the West African region, at some point that integration would happen in a single currency. Maybe not the ECHO.
Why must it happen?
But it would appear that that's what we seem to be working towards. If we're
I think we have much bigger issues to face internally than to worry about a bunch of French, Francophone countries banding together to create their own currencies. God bless them. I think it's good for them to be separated from France, but I don't think it's of any concern to us, and I don't think we should join.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it there. Mustafa, thank you for your time today. Thank you for being on Beyond Markets and, of course, sharing your thoughts and your outlook for the economy this year. Pleasure having you on the show. I've been speaking to Mustafa Chike Obi. He's Executive Vice Chairman of Alpha African Advisory. We've been looking, of course, at the macroeconomy here in Nigeria and, of course, some other broader macroeconomic issues outside of Nigeria. But that's it on Beyond Markets. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of the show on our website. That's cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets. And of course, you can send your thoughts and your comments to my Twitter handle too. It's at Esther O. Awuni. For myself and the team, it's bye for now.